Because here's the thing. This is a spicy... I can tell it's going to be delicious. He doesn't even know it, though. Maui's just walking in thinking it's a usual Monday. Like, all right, guys, how was the weekend? He's about to throw out as a bad point what could be an incendiary, if you understand, Maui, the team of people I've put together for this particular episode. All I'm saying is there's biases here. Let's see. Mouse, let's just pretend like it's just a legit. What's your bad point, Mau? What's your bad point?
I'll give it some preface too. I'll give it some preface too. I'll say what it is first, and then I'll give it a little preamble. Okay, so
no, you didn't.
My bad is that it's NBK to Mouz.
How dare you? Okay, come on, hit us with it. Come on.
So my bad is that because it's just more like this. It's more like the fact is that you're never going to find a replacement for ropz. Okay, I can criticize ropz all I want, but obviously he was outputting a lot in that server. Okay, like if but NBK for one couldn't even get his Valorant career, if you can even call it that, off the ground. He never played an official match for anybody, despite the fact that he was looking and trying to get on a team. That calls into question what his abilities are like in terms of just being able to innovate upon himself, bring new perspectives to his game and tack FPSs. That's a big red flag for me that he couldn't even get on a Valorant team. And then it's just that the fact is that NBK, I understand that he can provide something as a secondary caller here and there. I feel like he's going to conflict with Dexter pretty heavily. I don't understand. I don't know if this team is going to blow up or what, because I don't see how Dexter and NBK are going to work together, because I know NBK can be an outspoken individual. He talked about it a bit longer, which was actually incredibly insightful, and I'm glad he released that. But I don't know. I don't think that this move is... I think Mouz are just going to fall off a cliff a bit. I think they're going to maybe move to the 25th best in the world. Like Frozen, this has to be a Frozen carry job, or I just don't really see where they're going to go. Maybe Torzy will add some firepower, actually, but I don't think that NBK was the answer.
So it's a very, very broad topic that we could approach from a million different ways, right? First of all, I agree the 1-for-1 ropz NBK, there's no discussion, right? ropz is 20 times the player that NBK is in terms of mechanicals and output and whatnot. Okay, that is done, and I will give that to you. I think the difference between ropz and NBK is what he could potentially give to his teammates. And you mentioned it, NBK can be very polarizing in the sense that you either get along with him or you don't. And if you don't, it can be really complicated to work with. But the thing is, I look at this roster, I look at Dexter, Bimus, Frozen, and Torzy. Every single one of these individuals could benefit from being next to someone that used to be a champion and that knows what it is to be a champion. Every single one of them. I don't think any of them have more experience, have ever been as close to the top as he has been for his entire career. Now, I think as an individual, that's it. I don't have any expectations for NBK. I don't believe we're ever going to see the NBK of old, which he used to be one of the very best. That is over. That's fine. But I think that if they get along, if they find a way to think about Counter-Strike, then he will make everyone else on the team better. And as a result, the team will be better. But I don't believe they will. I said, I doubt that they will break into the top 10. I doubt it. But I think all of these individuals might just be better simply by the presence of NBK. Talking with him, thinking about him, about the game, how to approach the game. He's got one of the most unique and successful career we've had, at least in the French Counter-Strike. So you get along with him, you can get that knowledge, use it for you, great. I think all of these individuals will be better. But I don't think the team is going to be a success. I don't believe in the sense of a top 10. I doubt it.
I actually think this is a great move. I think the GMing in general is marvellous by Mouz. Bear in mind, they're not a team typically that spends big money. They have to go and take. Here's the interesting thing if you're Mouz Sports. You can't get the obvious people like the Monacies of the world. They're going to other squads. You always have to basically pick. It's like someone who doesn't have the top draft pick in American sports. You're picking like someone who could be good, but other people had the first pick and they didn't take him. And so you're actually having to be even more shrewd. And yet, look how consistently they actually do find good players in Mouz Sports. Like, they don't put that many feet wrong. So I'll say I actually think they've done it again, and here's why. Because the key thing for me is this. It's sort of like the NBK angle, but I'm going to say for the whole team. This isn't a replacement of ropz for NBK, because in my opinion, the key thing here is they did two replacements at once, and it's what it does to everyone's role in the team that I think is the key. Like, if people don't know, there's a quick story I could give a very sidebar, which is the team that Zonic and Ave and these guys came up with in 1.6 and had all the success with MTW. What people might not know know is they made one player move where they brought in a player called Sunder, right? And even though he was one of the stars of the team, it wasn't just him joining that made the team better. The team literally became like 1.5 times better when he joined because it swapped like other people's roles. Like one guy's role swapped slightly and then another one, and then it just turned out this made everyone's role more applicable to them. And suddenly it wasn't just him overperforming. It was like everyone went up 5 to 10% and the whole team became amazing. So here's my vision of this team. You take out Rops, but the other part is you take out Acor, right? Acor was basically a waste of space. Like he was taking a very important gun with massive amount of resources in terms of like the raw concept of an AWP. But obviously in the game, he didn't look like the team built around him or anything. And he wasn't doing much with it. So already we had a big negative there, right? First of all, the Torsi guy is another gamble like a Monacy. But first of all, at a lower level where it's more likely to be able to succeed. And quite frankly, I think he'd be hard pressed to do worse than Acor does. So I think we've already upgraded Torsi over Acor, probably, assuming he doesn't fall flat. And that already brings us firepower. And I've got Frozen already in this team. And the best part about Rops leaving this team, I'm telling you right now, mark your calendar, 1 year from today, Frozen will be a top 20 player in the world.
Yeah.
And that is the best thing about Rops leaving this team. Because him leaving this team, we've seen this happen so many times in Counter-Strike. If you're a fan and you don't understand what these guys are talking about, when they're talking about having space in a team or getting resources allocated or getting the role that suits you the best team ever to go and watch are the MSL teams. Because what happens is, every time a star player leaves the team, he keeps the same structure and he just puts someone else in a different spot and they become the star player. So if people don't know it, when AZ, Kirby, Confit, these were all the same fucking player. That was the joke. But the joke is they were all in the team while the other guy was in the spot that they were in to get all the frags. They just looked average. He moves, so AZ goes to G2, Kirby goes to Astralis, and the other guy, when he gets promoted and gets the resources, if he has the talent and it comes out of him, he becomes a star. So in my opinion, get ready for Frozen to become what Rops was in Mouse Spots. There's number one. If that happens, now already I've got a mega player. Then if Torsi can frag out with an AWP, I've got some pretty decent firepower for Mouse Spots, dude. Look, we're not talking about being, like we say, we're not going to be the 5th best team in the world. We're trying to just crack the top 10. Like, that'd be amazing if we could be 10th. Remember, we have just lost one of the best players in the world and we can't replace him directly. Then I'd say this, right? The NBK angle, I think, is even more interesting because, in my opinion, one, yes, he is going to be a secondary caller because, spoiler, that's just NBK's brain interacting with Counter-Strike. He can't help himself. The reason why I almost understand why he has to be compelled to become the IGL all the time, actually, I used to think it was ego. It isn't. It's actually he understands that he is inevitably in every team going to have a fundamental clash with the IGL. So why don't we just skip this and I'll become the IGL? Like, it's going to end that way anyway. It's going to get to the point where it's like, well, one of us is going to leave the team. Well, if he's the IGL, then it's always me, isn't it? Like, so in that scenario, spoiler, that is going to happen. It's even why I actually think, by the way, NBK has reflected. I actually know him personally and spoke to him about this. I'm not speaking out of school. It's why he has reflected recently and come forwards with this information where he says he's been diagnosed with Asperger's. Because I think what he's doing is looking back over his CSGO career and going, but I'm one of the most decorated players out. How do I get kicked out of all the teams? Why do people always have like a fracture? And what he's realised is certain elements of his character or the way his mind works maybe contrasting or clashing with some of his teammates. So I will say the downside is, even if you're cognizant of that, doesn't mean you can avoid it. Like, that probably still will be part of who he is. It's just part of his makeup as a person. It's how he sees the world, what his hierarchy of values is. If people don't know, in the French scene, actually people even way back in the day used to basically sort of derogatory think this guy was like a robot. They thought he was too serious. He's like too cutthroat. He only cares about winning. It has to be his way. If you don't agree with him, like Maniac says, there's going to be a problem eventually. There's going to be a conflict there. And crucially, he's not the guy, unfortunately, this is the worst part. If you want your ideas, if you've got really unique ideas and you want to get them over, you've got to sell people them. NBK's approach was more like, this makes sense, doesn't it? And if you agree, then you should just do it. It's like, no, you got to sell people, mate. You got to sort of like win me over and make me believe why it makes it. You got to have charisma, unfortunately, to do that. I never thought you had the IGL charisma. You couldn't properly get the buy-in, you know. So this is the issue for me. I think every role changes because of this. Torsi's better than Acor. Dexter gets a secondary caller. By the way, he desperately needed some fucking ideas. That team was just so basic, it was unbelievable. That helps Dexter. By the way, I think it's the only team ever where he probably needs NBK to insert himself a little bit. I think NBK actually is half decent in the game still. Go watch the last half of 2020 with his OG. He was still good. He could actually frag still. He could play a bunch of spots in a way that actually made viable sense in the meta at the time. And then let me think, what was the last guy? Let me think. Oh, BMAS, of course. And here's the other angle as well. I also think in this team, you're now actually going to see if BMAS is ever going to be a tier 1 player. In this squad, there's now space for you, BMAS. Like, you can actually be, in theory, one of the better players in this team, because NBK ain't coming to take your spots. He's not coming to take any resources from you. If anything, he's coming to help you be a good player. So if BMAS is ever going to make it and actually be a good rifler, this will be the team it happens in. In the last team, I did think he was just stuck in probably whatever's left over, and everyone else had their kind of priority because you had bigger names than him. Right now, it's the BMAS make it or break it show. But overall, I think the move's good. Like, look, Mouse Sports, they aren't a team that has the money or the power to ever be what they were before with Rops. He was hard carrying them, and even then they weren't that good. So realistically, the team is worse, but I actually think the moves overall make sense. I actually like, as I say, the impact on everyone in the squad.
You mentioned I just wanted to quickly touch on that relation between NBK and Dexter, because I think it's going to be one of the key elements, if not the key elements. If you look back in NBK's history, every time he had success, he was actually getting along with his IGL at the time, and he was thinking of the game the same way. It was the case with Existence for a while, and it was the case with Happy for a while, at the beginning of Vitality, and then it fell apart. And as Duncan was mentioning, when it falls apart, then it becomes the vicious cycle of, okay, now I have to replace the IGL, and then, oh, spoiler alert, I don't think NBK is able to be an IGL fully fledged. I think NBK can be an amazing secondary caller. He can be an amazing lieutenant to a captain, right? So that is going to be my focus. If these two together can find a way to think about Counter-Strike and want to play the same Counter-Strike, then it's going to be a massive upgrade. If they fall apart and they don't see the game the same way, then it might just be a bis repetita of what we have seen in the last few years. So that is going to be the one key, one element I'm looking at.
I'll say this actually. I'm being swayed actually by your guys' counter arguments here. That I think that one other component that's going to help them that has definitely flown under the radar, because I don't imagine people are too familiar with him, is that I think Cyclone actually has done he's done a pretty bang up job on that Mouz NXT lineup, and they even peaked at I think top 26. And when you look at the players on that team, you wouldn't really think they would have got there. But one development that has been one of the most striking features of that lineup is that Shuhei, this Polish guy that was on like Isako Boars before, like he was never even an in-game leader. They just decided to make him in the in-game leader. His calls were super simplistic in season 1 of WePlay. In season 3, they're out mid-rounding just about everybody when they want to now. So I think that his development probably was guided a lot by this Cyclone guy. And if Cyclone can give his input, if there's a trifecta of these 3 guys, Dexter, NBK, and Cyclone, working together to put together the best possible system, I do see a scenario in which this Mouse team can improve over what they have. But I think the opposite of this is just the other possible scenario is that there's just not enough firepower, and Bemis isn't a tier 1 player.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.